Okay, so Ross chapter 16 introduces us to a new set of verbal forms known as the participle. 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 All right, participle. A participle. A participle is a verbal adjective. Say that with me. A participle is a verbal adjective. So look carefully at that expression, verbal adjective. Are participles verb forms? Yes, they are verbal. Are they adjectives? Yes. They can do anything an adjective can do, only they're better than adjectives because they can also do what verbs can do. All right? So participles are verbal adjectives. Say that with me again. Participles are verbal adjectives. Participles are verbal adjectives. So, here is the good news about this chapter. The good news about this chapter is that you do not really have to learn any new verbal endings or adjective endings because participles use the same adjective endings that you already know. The adjective endings are the same noun endings that you've already learned, which are zero, t, eam, and oat. You remember those? Remember our Three Blind Mice song? Zero, t, eam, and oat. Eam and oat, and that's, yeah, I just thought I accidentally put a little dot there. So, that's a really crazy looking final tav, isn't it? Let's fix that. I have no idea what happened. Okay, so we're going to use these same adjective endings for our participles, okay? So all we're really going to have to learn is the internal vowel pointing for the participles. Participles are verbal forms that frequently can be translated as ing forms, and they function as adjectives. So let's just talk about some ways that a participle in English with an ing form or ending could be used. I could say something like, the screaming child is my son. Okay, so here's the subject noun, child. There's the verb, right? Subject, verb, and then my son is my predicate nominative. How does screaming relate to child here? Yeah, it's describing or modifying the child. It's telling me something about the child. What kind of child is my son? Well, the screaming child is my son. Okay? So this is a participle in English, and it functions adjectively, and that's what participles do. The thing about English ing forms is that they can also function as nouns, can't they? For example, I could also say something like, screaming is fun. All right. So, is my verb, fun is my predicate nominative. How is screaming functioning? It's the subject, right? So here it's a noun, isn't it? And over here, screaming is an adjective. Okay? In English, we have different grammatical words to describe these. In English, this first one is called a participle, and the second one is called a gerund. Do you guys remember that word from your English grammar? All right, a gerund is a verbal noun that ends with ing. A participle is a verbal adjective that ends with ing. All right? And in Hebrew, what we're doing is we're talking about participles, not gerunds. We're going to translate most of our Hebrew participles with ing forms, okay? But they're going to be functioning as adjectives. They won't be functioning as nouns, all right? Unless they're a particular type of adjective that can function as a noun, and we call those substantival adjectives, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. All right, so let's talk about how to form the Hebrew participles, okay? And we'll take pakad as our example. We're going to be able to form these in basically 4 ways because adjectives have 4 main endings: masculine singular, feminine singular, masculine plural, feminine plural. Okay, so we'll start just by taking our verbal root. Pay, kof, dalet, for the idea of to appoint or visit. We'll just use appoint for our meaning here. Okay, so what you need to know is that the basic pointing of the participle is holum with root 1 and sere with root 2. So pokade would be translated as appointing. Okay, appointing, pokade. This holum is defectively spelled for a holum vav. Remember what defective spelling is? Yeah, defective spelling is when you could spell something with a mater and a vowel point, but the mater is missing. Okay? Most of the time, your participle, and this, by the way, this is the cal participle. Okay? Cal is our stem. It's the only stem we know. And we're no longer dealing with the perfect conjugation with this verbal form. We're dealing with the participle. All right. So the cal participle will have a holum, sometimes a holum vav, but most frequently a holum with root 1, sere with root 2. So say this with me: pokade. Pokade. Which form is this pokade when I have no ending? Masculine singular. So if I want to describe a man as appointing, like the appointing man, the man who goes around appointing people, the appointing man, I'm going to use pokade. If, on the other hand, I want to describe a woman, the typical way to do that in Hebrew for the cal participle will be to use a segulate pattern. And I'm going to put an accent mark on the first segol. Pokadet. Pokadet. So that's feminine singular. I could see pokada. Okay, that is possible, but I more frequently see the double segol with the final tav. Remember, final tavs mark feminine singular forms as well. So pokadet or pokada. Okay, so let's say that, pokadet. Now, I want to describe a woman as pokadet. How would I translate that? I'm going to translate it the same way as I do the masculine form, because in English, our participles that end with ing, we don't have a different form of the participle for men or women, do we? So it still means appointing. The appointing man, pokade. The appointing woman, pokadet. Okay? And pokada. Now notice, this is a vocal shava if I'm using the kamate form. How do I know that? Well, when I look to the right, I see a holum, and is holum long or short? Long. It's long, and so the shava is vocal, right? So pokada, pokada. Now, the plural forms, what am I going to add to make this pokade masculine plural? Okay, good. So let's just start with pokade. I'm going to add im to make it masculine plural. The dalet was closing the kade syllable, right? It's now going to slide over and take the Keurig yod and make a new syllable, which leaves this open and pre-tonic because the im takes the stress. In Hebrew nouns, open pre-tonic syllables follow the old preacher's sermons, OPSRL. I'm getting my letters mixed up. OPSRL. Old preacher sermons are long, right? Open pre-tonic syllables require long. But remember, participles are not nouns. They are verbal adjectives. And so they're going to do what verbs do with open pre-tonic syllables, which is what? They reduce the vocal shava. Remember, pakad becomes pakda. I go to vocal shava when the that syllable goes open and pre-tonic. And that's what's going to happen here. This is, by the way, why we got a vocal shava under the kof with pokada. So it's going to be pokadim. Pokadim. And that, again, is going to be translated as appointing. But it's going to be describing plural men, or masculine plural nouns, right? And in the feminine plural, what do you think it would be? Yes, pokadot. Okay? So those are the forms of the participle. Now, I've given you the vowel pointing. All you have to do is switch out the consonants for other consonants to say other verbal forms, right? So if I wanted to say something like halach, to walk, if I wanted to say walking, the walking man, it would not be pokad, but what? Holech. I just take hey, lamed, kaf, and just add the vowel points I see here. Holech. What if I wanted to say walking and I'm referring to a woman? It would be holechet. Holechet. If it were men walking, it would be holechim, and women walking would be holehot. Okay? So, because it's almost Christmas, we should have used holech for our formula. We could have ho, 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 right? But notice, every form of the cal participle has a holum with root 1. It never reduces. Because it stands for a holum vav, which is historically long and therefore what? Unchangeable. Okay? But the sere is changeable, and that's why it can go down to vocal shava in these forms. Okay? So repeat after me. Pokad, pokedit, and then alternately pokada, pokadim, pokadot. All right, so I'm going to remove all that stuff there. Okay, so those are the forms of the participle. Now, if you take a quick gander down at the bottom of page 126, he gives you some irregular forms. What is irregular about the forms in number 1? On 16.2, we've got problems of a guttural nature, right? We have gutsgang issues. And so, what's my typical problem with gutsgang? Aside from doggish fortes not being able to be accepted by by guttural, I have issues of vocal shava not being allowed under a guttural, right? And that's going to be my issue here. So the first example he gives you is the verb form tsa'ak. Now, do y'all remember what tsa'ak means? Have we learned that? It means to cry out, okay? So we want to make this into a participle, crying out. The boy crying out is my son. Okay, so how would I say crying out? Using the masculine singular form, it's holum sere. So ache. Say that with me. So ache. If I want to talk about a woman crying out, I add the double segols here under roots 2 and 3 and add the final ta, right? So eket. So eket. All right? Now, let's say crying out men. So a keem, going to add eem to the kof. Kof is going to slide over and take the vowel. This is going to be open and pre-tonic. Hebrew verbs reduced to what? Vocal shava. And so the most normal and natural thing to do is to add a vocal shava here, but Ayin says, no, we jose, right? I'm going to give it a compound shava. Now, which compound shava do we like when we're gutturals? We really like the A-class kind, right? The one with the pathak there. So that's what we're shooting for, is putting an A-class compound shava there. So everybody, so akim. So for crying out men. And then women is ot, but it's going to do the same thing, right? Going to get the compound shava here. So that's the problem with so ache. Now, take a look at number 2. So this was the first example he gives, is with sa'ak. By the way, whenever kids are crying out, I like to tell them to put a sock in it. And sa'ak sounds like sock, doesn't it? Okay, number 2. We have the verb shama. You guys know what shama means, don't you? To hear. So there's the Cal Perfect 3MS. He heard. We don't want to say he heard, though. We want to say hearing. Participle. Okay? How do we do that? Well, I get rid of these vowel points, and I put which vowels with roots 1 and 2 for the masculine singular participle? Holum, sere. Okay? So that's what I should have. What's my problem here? I've got a guttural in what position? Root number 3. Root 3 is a guttural. And when I have a strong guttural, like ayin, het, and hey, and I have a long vowel before it, this little thing sneaks in there. What's that called? Remember what furtive means? Sneaky. So furtive pathak sneaks in here. And it's going to be pronounced right before the vowel that it's under and just slightly to the right of. So it's not shomei, but shomea. Shomea. Say that with me. Shomea. Shomea. All right? So that would be the masculine singular form. What about the feminine singular form? Well, I would expect to see show, and with the double segel, show me'et, right? Show me'et. But, we need to go back and remind ourselves. Guts gang. What the guts gang behavior? Let's just review the guts. What are the guts again? The guttural consonants are ayin, aleph, hey, het, and my wannabe resh, right? The 3 guttural characteristics. Number 1, no dagesh forte. Number 2, no vocal shava. We get compound shava. Silent shava is okay. Number 3, they prefer A-class vowels. Okay? And that's why Aleph prefers to go. We'll forget about that for a minute. But over here now, I've got a guttural, ayin, and it is in between these 2 segols, right? Segol before the ayin, segol after the ayin. Ayin says, "Give me an A," and we dutifully comply, and we give ayin an A, and in fact he gets 2 pathaks here, so it becomes show ma'at instead of show ma'at. Okay? You might remember most of our segulate nouns like melek, right, have the double segel, but we had that word for youth, lad, servant, na'ar, right? It wanted to be na'er, but the ayin here, this guttural, likes A-class vowels and tries to get it before and after if it can. That's what happens. Okay, so shome'et becomes shoma'at. So everybody say this with me. Shome'at and shoma'at. Everywhere else, shema is normal. So the masculine plural, shoma'im and shoma'ot. Okay, now, problem number 3. Here is where in root 3 position, I don't have a strong guttural, but I have a very weak one. Remember how I told you Aleph is like an Astros pitcher, right? It is a lousy closer. And so I have Koreh for my masculine singular. That's normal, but the Aleph is quiesced here. But I already had a long vowel, okay? But look at the feminine singular here. Here's what I wanted to see. Koreh-et, right? And what ends up happening is this Aleph quiesces, loses its vowel. Segol, is that long or short? Short. It is short. So what it's going to do is, with the loss of the Aleph, the loss of the consonant, it is going to compensatorily lengthen. Well, when you see segol, usually you should think that that's what vowel class, A, I, or U class? I. It's I. And I need to lengthen this to a long I class vowel. What is my long, tone long I class vowel? Sere. It's ere. So it becomes koreh. So koreh becomes koreh. Okay? Everywhere else, this verb is normal. Kore'im, kore'ot. Or I get the vocal shavas. Okay? The reason kore'im is normal, by the way, is because the Aleph is not going to try to close the syllable. It's opening, right? It's got its own vowel. The kirik yod is the vowel and Aleph is the consonant. So it's retained its consonantal value. It's leading that the kirik yod vowel. Okay? So kore'im is normal. All right. Now, let's real quickly just talk about 16.3, the syntax of the participles. What that means is how do the participles actually occur in patterns of words together in the Hebrew language. Okay, what you need to know, and again, this is actually happily not going to be new material. This is going to be old material. It's because participles are verbal adjectives. So there are three functions of participles, and they match the three functions of adjectives. What were the three functions of adjectives? Well, they can be attributive, they can be predicative, they can be substantival, okay? And all of the rules for attributive, predicate, and substantival uses apply to the participles, okay? So, let's look at the first one. I could have ha-melech, and then we'll use the example that Ross gives you. Ha-melech, shofet. Get rid of that little stroke there. So ha-melech, ha-shofet. Okay, so notice what I have here. I have my noun, I have my participle after the noun. Does the noun and the participle, do they agree in gender, number, and definiteness? They do. I have ha-ha, and I have zero ending, right? So this is an attributive use of the participle, and it's telling me what kind of king I'm talking about, right? I could translate this as the judging king, and that means that the king being described by the participle is doing that action. Okay, the judging king. What's another way to translate this? I could also translate this as the king who is judging. Okay? Or it could be the king who judges. So it could be, the participle could be used to describe something that's in process or something that normally happens, right? So you'll make a choice there based on contextual factors. So that's the attributive use of the participle. We also could have a predicate use of the participle. And again, it's going to follow the same kind of grammatical requirements. And if I have ha-melech again with my article, ha-melech, and then instead of ha-shofet, oh, I keep wanting to put a tape first. I have no idea why. Just show fate. Okay, notice ha-melech is masculine singular, shofet is masculine singular, but there's a ha on ha-melech, there is no ha on shofet. This is a predicate use. Okay, this means that I'm not telling you what kind of king we're talking about. I'm telling you rather what the king is. In this case, using the participle, it's what the king is doing by way of, some activity. So I'm going to translate this as the king is judging. Okay? Oops. I don't know where that S came from. The king is judging. The king is judging. All right? Now, I'm going to vary the gender and number of shofet here depending on the gender and number of the subject. So if it were the woman is judging, what would I say? Well, it'd be ha-isha. Yeah, then it could be something like shofetet. Okay? Or shofetah. Okay? If I wanted to say the kings are judging, it would be ha-malachim shofetim. Exactly. All right. And then I could also have a substantival use of the participle. And that's where the participle itself is functioning as a noun. Like I could say something like ha, sho, fate, and let's just say halach, el, ha'ir. Okay? How would I translate that? Ha, sho, fate. That's a participle, right? It's from shafat, holem, sere. But is there a noun that this agrees with in gender, number, and definiteness? Nope. It's functioning as the noun, right? It's a substantival use. And I translate this as something like, yeah, the judging one, which equals the judge, right? A lot of times your participle can be retranslated from the judging one, the blanking one, to some like agency noun, like the judge. So the judging one went to the city, right? So hashofet halach, the judger went, the judging one went, or the judge went. Okay? You guys learned the verb shamar, didn't you? What does shamar mean? To keep or to guard. So what would ha-shomer be if it's a substantival participle? Ha-shomer. The watcher or the guarder, which would be the guard, right? A shomer is a guard. Okay, so the shomer, ha-shomer, the guard. Okay? All right. So those are the ways that the participle can function. So when my participle is attributive, it has to go where in relation to the noun it modifies? After. Remember, attributive, quadruple A, right? Attributive adjectives always go after, right? And since participles are verbal adjectives, they can be attributive, they have to go after. And they'll agree in gender, number, and definitiveness. Predicate participles almost always go after the noun as well, but if the noun is articular, the predicate participle will not be articular. In fact, the predicate participle is never articular, okay? The predicate uses of the participle are never articular, but they indicate a verbal action that the subject is doing. And let me just make a comment about predicate participles, okay? They are, first of all, they are going to give what some people like to describe as durative action, action that happens over time. And that's why we will frequently use is blanking, right? Or was blanking. The king is judging. It's something that happens, you know, it's a process of action, or it occurs over time. Secondly, it is timeless or atemporal. What does that mean? It means that the participle does not have any inherent tense value. So if I say Hamelech Shofet, I could translate that as the king is judging. I could translate it as the king was judging, or the king will be judging. Okay? Those are all possible. So there is no inherent tense value when you use participles. You have to get that from the context. And then thirdly, predicate participles are impersonal. Okay, what I mean by that is that they are not marked for first, second, or third person. Okay? Take a look at Hamelech Shofet. If I were to want to say something like the king judged, and if I were to use the cal-perfect, which person, gender, number would my cal-perfect verb have to be? It would have to be 3ms. So it would have to be shafat, cal-perfect, 3ms. That cal-perfect has a person marking, doesn't it? Third person. But if you look at my participle, the king is judging. How is judging marked in Hebrew, shofet? It is only masculine and singular, right? It is not third person masculine and singular. So, what if I had a first person pronoun as my subject? What if I wanted to say, I am judging? Remember the pronoun I? Yeah, it's ani, right? How would I say I am judging? I would use the first common singular pronoun ani, Would I change the form of shofet if I'm a man? No, I wouldn't. It would still be the masculine singular shofet, right? So you see, it doesn't matter if the king is a third person entity, but I'm just using a masculine singular form because that third person entity is masculine singular. If I'm the one saying I am judging, I'm a masculine singular entity. I happen to be first person, but my form of shofet is only masculine singular because I don't mark participles for person, okay? That is because participles are verbal adjectives. We only mark them the way adjectives are marked, which is for gender and number. All right, so that's our introduction to the participles. The last thing in this chapter just has to do with this matter of adding pronominal suffixes to the direct object marker. That's 16.4. You know how et marks definite direct objects, right? So if I want to say John killed him, I can add et and a direct object directly to the et to get the pronoun him as the direct object. And it's going to be o, though. It'll almost always have a holum here. And that is to be distinguished from the form you saw, ito, in the last chapter with the dagesh forte and the kirik right here. What was that? Ito. That's with him. Okay? But to say something like, I killed him, it's otho. It's him as a direct object. The pronoun is attached to the direct object marker. So this is going to be real critical. How will you be able to tell the difference? The most important thing is if the form of et occurs with a dagesh forte in the tav, then it means with. Okay? That's the most important thing for you to look for. If it occurs with the dagesh forte in the tav, it means with. If there's no dagesh forte in the tav, then it's the direct object marker, and you just translate the pronoun that's attached to it. Okay? All right. Well, we'll stop.